2 minutes remaining in one of the most back and forth, entertaining Super Bowls of all time. The Chiefs have 3rd and 8. The game is on the line. What happens next? You probably know, but welcome to the 2022 NFL season recap. If you were in a coma from September through February, this is for you.
First swag Kazakage, leader of the hidden village of the Den.
Wow, is he really overthrowing it? Huh? Took it down the sideline.
I don't know how to make sausage.
You never want to take a helmet to the crotchal region.
Don't let these tears fool you. There's all dog around this mug.
It's a good way to wind up in concussion protocol, even though you don't get into the game.
All the teams. Not all the games. Balls deep. It is Best Ball Mania season, and oh my god, I freaking love drafting football teams in the summer with Underdog Fantasy. Now, the Best Ball Mania tournament is back and growing every year, and this year the first place prize is $3 million. That's for the season-long winner there. I'm also dropping a link to my first fantasy leagues I'm drafting in below if you want to play against me. $10 entry. It's a slow draft, so you have hours and hours to make your picks. 18 rounds with 12 people total playing. The draft starts once the league is full, and a lot of you dominated me last year, so do it again. Plus, if you're watching the finals, you can dabble in the pick'em games. Personally, I'm going for higher on anything Jokic related, but personally, I can't play yet in Colorado, so check your qualifying states for the pick'em games. And again, come beat me in my private fantasy leagues linked below with my code Thatsgood, which you'll get a 100% match deposit bonus by Underdog up to $100. Use my code. Week 1. We've got the defending champion, Los Angeles Rams, opening the season at home against the Buffalo Bills, a team who proved to men and women everywhere that 13 seconds is more than enough time to be disappointed. But Buffalo was no disappointment in the season opener, dropping a 21-point win on the champs in their building. Buffalo also followed up their season opener with a 41-10 Monday Night Football destruction of the Tennessee Titans, the AFC's number 1 seed a year before. Buffalo might have made it 3 straight to start the season, but the weather in Miami was hotter than they were on a 89-degree day with 63% humidity. The Dolphins bounced back from a butt punt, backed up in their own end zone. This scramble from Josh Allen to upset the Bills in Week 3. Miami had a new head coach and a new special weapon on offense. After Miami hired 49ers offensive coordinator and part-time comedian Mike McDaniel.
I just wanted him to stop scrambling. And it was pretty irritating because he didn't listen at all. Figured no one had asked him to stop it, so I gave that a try. Other coaches can learn from my experience that he does not listen. So
they traded first-round picks for Kansas City game-breaker Tyreek Hill, a trade that begged a lot of questions, including can Patrick Mahomes succeed without Tyreek Hill, and can Tyreek Hill succeed without Patrick Mahomes? Turns out the answer was that's correct. Now catching passes with a left-handed spin on them, Tyreek Hill put up over 1,700 yards in a new offense, becoming a legit MVP candidate for most of the season, as was his quarterback Tua Tagovailoa. Tua averaged an outstanding 9 yards per attempt when he threw the ball, usually getting off quick passes to Hill or Jalen Waddle, who contributed over 1,300 yards of his own to the Dolphins' dynamic offense. Joining Emmanuel Sanders and Demaryius Thomas and Isaac Bruce and Torrey Holt as the only receiving duos to combine for over 3,000 yards in a single season. Tua looked like he had figured things out and was a perfect fit in McDaniel's offense, but unfortunately his health didn't cooperate. Tua hit his head in that Week 3 win over Buffalo, getting up, losing his balance, only for team doctors to blame back spasms for his staggering all over the field. Tua re-entered the game won the game, and 4 days later was on Thursday Night Football and was concussed again, this time in a loss to the Bengals. This total failure of the protocol caused the NFL to take a cautious approach to concussion spotting, and as a result, a lot of players, both concussed and not concussed, were removed from play in the following weeks. Primarily because of Tua's status, the Dolphins' first season with Mike McDaniel was a roller coaster. 3 straight wins, 3 straight losses, 5 straight wins, 5 straight losses. Tua, Teddy Bridgewater, and rookie QB Skylar Thompson all started games in 2022. And that wasn't a problem unique to Miami. 66 different QBs started a game during the 2022 season, setting a new NFL record. The previous mark was 64, set in 2007. David Blau tied it in week 17, and Nathan Peterman and Sam Howell broke it in week 18. But it may not have mattered what the Bears did at quarterback because their scoring defense was dead last. Although they did have the top rushing offense in the NFL, including 1,100 from second-year QB Justin Fields, after Ryan Fitzpatrick called them out on Thursday Night Football. But that couldn't get Matt Eberflus's squad to crack 3 wins. They were penalized for using a towel to dry the grass in the wettest game of the season, Week 2 against the 49ers in a rare win. After 10 straight losses, though, to finish the season, the Bears looked like they would secure the 2nd overall pick in the 2023 draft. Until an old friend had something to say about it. 15 years after he led the Bears to Super Bowl 41, Lovie Smith was getting his 3rd head coaching gig in the NFL, this time with the Houston Texans, who had just ousted David Culley after 1 season. After finally offloading Deshaun Watson in the offseason, the Texans looked like a team with a semblance of a plan, at least for them, even if the on-field experience was as chaotic as ever. It looked like the 1st overall pick was theirs the whole season, and after narrowly escaping victory against the Chiefs, all the Texans had to do was lose to the Colts in Week 18. Come on, guys, just lose one more game to the Colts, and you get Bryce. Yo, no, he caught it. Lovie Smith changed his first name to Hate as he hate-fucked the Texans out of the 1st overall pick. That was the 7th consecutive loss to end the season for the Colts. After getting off to a 3-2-1 start, including an upset victory over Kansas City, head coach Frank Reich got the axe after a trio of losses, prompting Jim Irsay to do a very Jim Irsay thing. He hired former Colts center and current ESPN analyst Jeff Saturday as his new interim head coach.
We had the conversation and it escalated quickly. Never
mind that Saturday had never coached at the NFL level, or that there were plenty more assistants qualified and hungry for the opportunity. They got the just snap the damn ball guy to run the team. And to no one's surprise, he wasn't very good at it.
Hey, quit calling the plays, all right?
Hey, we gotta run it down. We gotta run it down.
Yeah, Jeff.
Hey.
Saturday actually won his first game, his only game, at Las Vegas, thanks in part to a 39-yard run from 37-year-old Matt Ryan. If they just used Matt Ryan's spry legs more, they could have won the Super Bowl. But when he had stiffer competition than Josh McDaniels, Saturday was unable to outmaneuver his fellow head coaches. That was never more apparent than on Saturday, December 17th, when the Colts went to Minneapolis. The 2022 Vikings are a bit of a paradox. They won 13 games in the regular season, but were outscored by 3 points. It took miracle wins like the one they got at Buffalo when a preposterous Justin Jefferson catch and a fumble snap by Buffalo forced an improbable overtime win for the Vikings. Against Indy, the Vikings were staring down the barrel at a humiliating loss, down 33 points after the first half. Oh, primetime Kirk, same old Vikings losing to Saturday on a Saturday. Wrong. The Vikings stormed back, mounting the largest comeback in NFL history ever, and won the game with 3 seconds left. Minnesota had essentially locked up the NFC North, and with the Bears down in the cellar of the division, 2 teams were left jostling for position in the middle, the Green Bay Packers and the Detroit Lions. After a waiting game in the offseason, Aaron Rodgers decided to return for the Packers, where he inherited almost an entirely new receiving corps, as well as a new offensive coordinator. The Lions were going into year 2 with Dan Campbell and Jared Goff and had emerged from Hard Knocks as one of the more likable teams in the NFL, and after a 1-6 start, they began to bite some kneecaps and eat some one-ass-cheeked opponents, or whatever weird shit Dan Campbell said.
Doesn't matter if you have one ass cheek and 3 toes, I will eat your ass.
And even while the Lions were losing, there was optimism because their offense was scoring a lot of points. They just had a horrible defense. Now, Detroit started their run with a 15-9 win over the Packers. Rookie defensive back Kirby Joseph picked off Rodgers twice in that game. The Lions may have been robbed of a postseason spot, though, by the most self-aware announcer jinx in NFL history on Thanksgiving.
Do not talk to me about an announcer's jinx. Michael Badgley has not missed a kick all year, field goal or PAT.
Well, then I won't say.
You can talk about it. 29 yards.
About it.
Here's Badgley's kick. Oh, my gosh. Oh, no.
The Pack were searching for an identity on offense, losing 8 of 9 in the middle of the season, and hampered by the most drops in the NFL, Aaron Rodgers looked, for the first time in a long time, a bit pedestrian. He was also dealing with some injuries. Linebacker Quay Walker was ejected twice during the season, once for pushing a member of the Lions training staff, which was sort of a metaphor for their entire season, shooting themselves in the foot. Yeah, that foot, Aaron.
I will eat your toes.
Now the Lions, who were thriving offensively thanks to touchdown leader Jamal Williams, who broke Barry Sanders' single-season rushing touchdown record, and creative OC Ben Johnson, were looking to steal a playoff spot in the NFC, and all it came down to was a Week 18 game between these two teams. But after an overtime win by the Seahawks had unfortunately disqualified Detroit from the postseason, they were given one role on Sunday Night Football: spoilers. In Aaron Rodgers' final game as a Packer, the Lions intercepted his final throw and converted a 4th and 1 to put the game and the 2022 Packers on ice. Or Isowaska. Kinda crazy, both Rodgers and Brady's final throws with their respective first teams were interceptions. In place of the Lions and Packers in the playoffs were the Seattle Seahawks. Damn it. Okay, I guess it's finally time to bring this part up. If you watch this channel, you've heard this story 1,000 times. The Seahawks traded quarterback Russell Wilson to the Denver Broncos. The Seahawks got some picks and players or whatever, and they opted to start over with Geno Smith, who was starting over Drew Lock. The schedule maker said, hey, it might be a good idea to start the season with Russell Wilson going back home to play his old team on Monday Night Football. A bunch of missed opportunities for Denver, one of the worst coaching blunders ever, and Geno Smith.
They wrote me off. I ain't right back, though.
And unlike Gronk or Antonio Brown, it's not because he never learned to read or write. It was spite or revenge. Now, the Broncos won 2 games after that, and the Seahawks lost 2 straight, but then everything flipped. While Russell Wilson and the Broncos offense was not cooking, Chef Geno, alongside 2 dynamic receivers and rookie running back Kenneth Walker, were whipping up an instant rebuild in Seattle. Denver was doing high knees on airplanes, losing heartbreakers in overtime, and getting roasted by Patrick Starr on Christmas Day, and firing their new head coach after 15 games. Meanwhile, the Seahawks nailed all of their draft picks, including first-rounder Charles Cross, and found a late-round gem in corner Tariq Woolen, who picked off 6 passes, tied for the league lead with Broncos safety Justin Simmons. Geno Smith was a first-time Pro Bowler in his 10th year. Russell Wilson had become the butt of all the jokes, and a Week 18 victory over the worst defending champions of all time put the Seahawks in the playoffs. The NFC West was a very strange place, though, in 2022. Like I mentioned, the Rams had followed up their title with just 5 wins, acquiring Baker Mayfield after the Panthers released him to finish the season after Matthew Stafford had gotten injured. The Cardinals were a flaming disaster. Kyler Murray's injury had Arizona on a 7-game death streak to end the season, which couldn't have finished up quick enough for Cliff Kingsbury to pack up his shit and fly to Thailand. At the top of the division stood the San Fran 49ers, a team that started 3-4. Shout out Jimmy G for running out of the back of the end zone, only to win their last 10 games, the last 6 of which came with third-string QB, Mr. Irrelevant Brock Purdy. Purdy's success as a 7th-round QB, taking over for Jimmy G, who was playing very well before he got hurt again, was one of the best storylines from 2022. The 49ers, on the whole, appeared that they might be injury resistant, surviving the losses of Elijah Mitchell, Tevin Coleman, Deebo Samuel, Javon Kinlaw, and Jimmy Ward. But when each successive quarterback gets a little better, and George Kittle stays healthy, and Nick Bosa wins Defensive Player of the Year, and you trade for Christian McCaffrey midseason, you can withstand quite a bit, especially when Run CMC comes in, throws, rushes, and catches for a touchdown in the same game. In maybe their most dominant showing of the season, San Francisco hosted the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and dropped 35 on their heads, surrendering just 1 touchdown with less than 3 minutes to go in the game. And you know what? Seeing a late-round draft pick outduel Tom Brady was probably for Brady like seeing himself in the mirror. Purdy's ascension coincided with Brady's demise. And the 45-year-old quarterback posted a losing record for the first time in his career. But in typical lucky-ass Brady fashion, he still won his division at 8-9. The Bucs were dead last across the board in all rushing categories, scoring just 5 times on the ground in 2022, and Brady's 733 passing attempts were the most in his career. Despite sloppy, inefficient play, the Bucs still outpaced their division rivals. Now in the NFC South, the Panthers started the year with Baker Mayfield and Matt Rule, but ended it with Steve Wilks and Sam Darnold, a guy who won his last start of the year completing 5 passes for 43 yards and 2 picks. That victory came against the New Orleans Saints, who seemed pretty much lost in their first season, minus the great Sean Payton. The Panthers and Falcons actually did play in one of the best games of the year, though. A 37-34 overtime win for Atlanta, where P.J. Walker and Marcus Mariota went toe-to-toe in a fourth quarter that had 34 combined points. But Younghoe Koo ended it all in OT for the Falcons. Now back to the Saints. Dennis Allen became the reluctant choice at head coach, Andy Dalton the reluctant starter at QB, and somehow 30-year-old former Bears first-round pick Kevin White had a 64-yard reception in 2022. Michael Thomas scored 3 touchdowns in just 3 games for the Saints, which was one more than Falcons tight end Kyle Pitts in 10 games. Sounds bad, but that was actually a career high for him. Stuck with Marcus Mariota and rookie QB Desmond Ridder throwing him the ball, Pitts couldn't get going in year 2, and the Falcons wasted a top 3 rushing offense, going just 7-10 in a very winnable division, and then of course took Bijan Robinson at pick 8 to add to that rushing attack. Now if the NFC South was the most winnable division, which was the opposite? Surprise, surprise, the NFC East was no longer a cakewalk in 2022. It was a minefield. The hire of Brian Daboll and the resurgence of Saquon Barkley turned the Giants into a real contender, and Dan Jones' sudden ability to not hand the ball to the other team proved invaluable as the G-Men posted a winning record for the first time since 2016. Dan Jones had over 700 rushing yards on the season, which put him in the same category as Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, and Lamar Jackson. The Eagles were simply the best team in the NFC, winning their first 8 games and dominating every game they played. The Washington Commanders, name pending again, sporting their new name and uniforms for the first time, blew a 7-5 start but finished a clean 500 at 8-1. Despite a quarterback carousel that took them from Wentz to Heineke to Howell, the team had some heartwarming moments in 2022. I'm thinking about this video that captured Ron Rivera personally announcing Pro Bowl nominations, including Brian Robinson, Robinson, who was returning from preseason gunshot wounds to rush for 800 yards, and of course Dan Snyder obstructing justice once again. Washington got their 8th win in Week 18, but mostly because the Cowboys had locked up a wild card spot at 12-5, thanks to a breakout year from running back Tony Pollard and a 4-1 team record during a stretch where backup QB Cooper Rush was leading the team. Hell, even USFL MVP Cavante Turpin made the Pro Bowl as a kick returner. Dallas might have had a chance to win the NFC East if not for a shocking overtime loss in Jacksonville, a back-and-forth affair that ended on a 52-yard pick six from Rayshawn Jenkins, who seemed to be one of the most clutch defenders for the second half of the season. And who exactly were the 2022 Jags? Well, they dethroned the Titans as the class of the AFC South, while Tennessee fell apart without Ryan Tannehill, even with Derrick Henry putting up 1,500 rushing yards. The Jags, though, shrugged off a 3-7 start as they washed off the stank of Urban Meyer, winning 5 straight to end the season. And all of that began in Tennessee with a Trevor Lawrence coming out party at Nissan Stadium. The Jags were criticized for overpaying receiver Christian Kirk in free agency, but he silenced naysayers with 1,100 yards and 8 touchdowns. Travis Etienne was finally healthy and contributed nearly 1,500 yards from scrimmage, prompting the Jags to trade running back James Robinson, and Evan Ingram became an actual weapon who actually held onto the ball at age 28. This was a team, of course, picking first overall for the second straight year, and after selecting Lawrence in 2021, dropped the first pick on Georgia linebacker Trayvon Walker, who didn't exactly light the world on fire as a rookie. If they could get a do-over, the Jags might have picked Cincinnati corner Sauce Gardner, who in reality went 4th overall to the New York Jets. Sauce was a major reason the Jets jumped out to a 7-4 start despite rotating Joe Flacco, Mike White, and Zach Wilson at QB. Zach Wilson became the glaring problem with the Jets, which is why they now have Aaron Rodgers. And even with all of those quarterback issues, Garrett Wilson managed to win Offensive Rookie of the Year at wide receiver, as did Sauce Gardner on the other side of the ball, and Sauce, in a signature moment after a win at Lambeau Field, donned the iconic cheesehead on the frozen tundra itself, a moment I'm sure he'll hold on to forever, much like his strategy with guarding receivers. I believe the NFL script writers call this foreshadowing. Now, you could tell the Jets' success wasn't sustainable in Week 11 at Foxborough when a 3-3 deadlock was broken by a Marcus Jones punt return touchdown with just 5 seconds left in the game. Marcus Jones was easily the best M. Jones on the Patriots roster in 2022, so much so that when he went down with an ankle injury, we all thought Bailey Zappi may have won the job. This team was so painfully fucking boring, though, that I think I'm already done talking about them. As it turns out, Josh McDaniels moving from the Pats offensive coordinator position to the Raiders head coach was a classic lose-lose. The Patriots offense got worse with Pencil Dick running the show, and McDaniels proved he could pick up where he left off as a leading man in 2010 while back with the Broncos. The Raiders could have stuck with Rich Bisaccia, but instead opted for the NFL's version of Napoleon and paid the price. The team traded for Devontae Adams, reuniting him with college teammate Derek Carr, and while Adams put up big numbers, his most memorable highlights were pushing a cameraman and getting tripped up by Hunter Renfrow on a Hail Mary, and this final reception of the year coming from Jarrett Stidham, not Derek Carr, who the Raiders then traded. Still, the Raiders had some fun, memorable moments throughout the season. Remember this fun one, Raiders? This silly game against the Cardinals where you lost when Kyler Murray had time to play a quick round of team deathmatch before scrambling his way to a 2-point conversion on the longest 2-point conversion in NFL history. Then in the middle of the season, the Raiders won back-to-back games with walk-off touchdowns in overtime. Adams against Denver and Josh Jacobs against Seattle. A day when the league's leading rusher combined for over 300 yards. But for the Raiders, nothing will top Week 15. Did I say the Patriots were boring? Well, they were, except for one play in particular. You know the play, this desperate move late that resulted in Chandler Jones stiff-arming Mac Jones into the hell I'm sure Bill Belichick will drag him down to. And somehow, Bill Belichick made Josh McDaniels look like the smart coach. Up north, there were 4 smart coaches calling the shots, but only one of them had consistency at the QB position. Zach Taylor and the Bengals got off to a difficult start, including a 4-pick season opener, but finished with 12 wins after stumbling to an 0-2 start to the season. The Pittsburgh Steelers embarked on their first year post-Ben Roethlisberger after taking the ball out of Mitch Trubisky's hands. The only rookie to go in the first round at quarterback, Kenny Pickett, amassed some modest numbers but made some seriously big dick throws down the stretch. Game winners to Najee Harris and George Pickens against the Raiders. The Steelers finished 9-8 but split the season series with the Cleveland Browns, who sold the farm for massage enthusiast Deshaun Watson, who didn't even step on the field until December, and when he did play, he wasn't better than Jacoby Brissett, who filled in for the first 11 games. So despite 1,500 yards on the ground from running back Nick Chubb, Watson's toxic Chubb wasted a season for the Browns. Which for the Browns is just called the season. That leaves Baltimore, who looked deadly following a trade that netted them former Bears linebacker Roquan Smith. It wasn't enough to stave off a ferocious comeback by the Dolphins in Week 2, where they scored 28 fourth-quarter points, and during a Week 13 win against Denver, Jackson suffered an injury that forced QB Tyler Huntley into the starting lineup, whose 2-touchdown and 3-pick stat line were apparently Pro Bowl numbers. And yeah, after all of those years calling the Pro Bowl a flag football game, they just made it a flag football game. But you'll have to take the NFL's word for that, as nobody watched it. Alright, so there's one big thing we haven't talked about yet, but it was one of the most harrowing moments of the NFL season. On Monday Night Football, a Week 14 matchup between the Bills and the Bengals looked like it was going to decide who got the 1 seed in the AFC. But in the early going, disaster struck when Bills safety Damar Hamlin collapsed following a hit as he went into cardiac arrest. After Bills trainer Denny Kellington, among others, saved Hamlin's life, literally restarting his heart, the game was eventually canceled. I mean, it took a while for the NFL to make that call and cancel the game. Nobody knew how those teams could have went on that night, and it was a jarring and pretty scary moment on national television. I mean, we almost saw a man die in front of us. Technically, he did, but there was a lot of criticism about how that situation was handled. Ultimately, the credit goes to the training staff who revived Damar Hamlin, who has made a full recovery from that tragic incident. Hamlin's recovery was on everybody's mind, but it was going to take a lot of strategy to figure out who was going to get the 1 seed in the AFC. It would come down to the Bills, the Bengals, or behind door number 3, the Kansas City fucking Chiefs. Remember, the Chiefs got rid of the most dynamic weapon in the NFL when they traded Tyreek Hill, and it didn't seem to matter. Patty Mahomes threw for 5,200 yards and 41 touchdowns, edging out Jalen Hurts for MVP, while Travis Kelce posted a 110-catch, 1,300-yard campaign that led all tight ends. They may have lost to the Bills and Bengals in the regular season, but following their ring around the rosy Raiders beatdown in Week 18, you know how this ends. After some bizarre tiebreakers and the possibility of a neutral site AFC Championship game, the Chiefs claimed the de facto 1 seed, because of course they did. On to the playoffs. The wildcard round featured 6 games, what felt like 50 missed extra points from real time with Brett Maher. Brett Maher infamously went 1 for 5 on PATs in that game, but Dallas ultimately handed Tom Brady his final loss as a pro. A valiant effort from third-string QB Skylar Thompson and the Dolphins wasn't enough to beat Buffalo, and a 98-yard fumble recovery touchdown from Sam Hubbard capitalizing on Tyler Huntley trying to leap into the end zone, advanced the Bengals. 41 points from the 49ers forced Geno Smith to buy some stationery, and a surprise victory on the road by the Giants, who simply outclassed the most overperforming team in 2022, the Vikings. At least they had this moment from Kirk Cousins on that airplane. But the moment of the week happened on Saturday night when Trevor Lawrence and the Jags erased a 27-0 deficit against the Chargers in the calmest, coolest comeback we've ever seen, capped off by a Riley Patterson field goal that barely woke Al Michaels from his slumber.
Patterson boots them into the divisional round.
And somehow, a half-awake Al Michaels is still better than Chris Collinsworth. A week later, though, the Jags' storybook season ended in Arrowhead, as former Jacksonville QB Chad Henne mounted a 98-yard drive in relief of Patrick Mahomes, who suffered a high ankle sprain in the second quarter. Henne's drive ended up being the difference, and Chiefs fans were scared for probably the first time all season as we watched Mahomes hobble all over the field. Yet, even with one ankle, he was still impossible to sack. The Giants also fell, and fell hard in Philly, as the Eagles rushed for a combined 268 yards en route to a 31-point win over the Giants. In a snow globe game in Buffalo, a rematch of the Monday night game that never really happened, it was the visiting Bengals that took control early and stayed on top, holding Josh Allen in check and coming out with a 17-point win over the Bills. I'm sure Bills OC Ken Dorsey is still doing this every night before he goes to bed. Out in Santa Clara, Brock Purdy couldn't do it again, could he? Oh, yeah, he could. Purdy was steady, and a late touchdown by Christian McCaffrey forced Dallas to run the strangest play I have seen since whatever the fuck the Colts did that one time. The Cowboys fall to the 49ers in back-to-back postseasons, running dumb plays to end the game. Look, the 49ers were injured all season, but when Brock Purdy tore his UCL in Philly in the NFC Championship game, and then Josh Johnson went down in relief with the concussion, we were robbed of an interesting contest in the title game. A situation that led to a rule change, allowing teams to now dress 3 QBs without burning a roster spot. Regardless, the Eagles' offense overpowered one of the best defenses in the league in that game. We did get a very interesting matchup later that night in Arrowhead. The Bengals climbed out of a 10-point hole and tied the game 20-20 in the late going, but an untimely late hit by defensive end Joseph Asai put KC in field goal range, and Harrison Butker sent the Chiefs back to the Super Bowl for the 3rd time in 4 years. Patty Mahomes made the quickest recovery from a high ankle sprain in human history and willed Kansas City to the big game. The Super Bowl in Arizona, we had the matchup of the top 2 MVP candidates, a dynamic rushing attack versus a dominant aerial offense. Like I said at the top of this video, this game was back and forth. Back and forth. No team led by more than 1 score at any point in this game. And despite Patrick Mahomes throwing 3 touchdowns, Jalen Hurts looked like the best player on that slippery field, becoming the first QB to rush for 3 touchdowns in a Super Bowl. And for good measure, he mixed in a bomb to A.J. Brown just to keep it interesting. But there were 2 X factors in this game. First, the Eagles' pass rush never got a sack in the biggest game of the season, despite notching a league-best 70 sacks in the regular season. Now, was that a result of the Chiefs' game plan drawn up by former Eagles head coach Andy Reid, who may have gotten a few tips from another former Eagles head coach and Doug Peterson, or was it because of the shitty turf they rolled in, especially for the Super Bowl? Hard to say, but the Eagles' pass rush was non-existent. The Eagles could have used a sack on the final Chiefs drive of the game. Any point, really. In fact, they could have just used a stop on that final series, and it looked like they got one deep in their own territory on 3rd and 8. Except The refs decided this was a hold by James Bradberry. In the most crucial juncture of the season, they called this a hold, and it allowed the Chiefs to sit on the ball and kick a field goal to put them up 38-35 with just 8 seconds left. In one of the most entertaining Super Bowls I've ever seen, it felt like a total nut punch to see it decided on a play like that. But had Philly gotten a little bit of time to work with, I'm not sure they get the win. It just would have been nice to see what Philly could have done with a little bit of time there left. For the Chiefs, it was their third Lombardi trophy in team history. Second since 2019, Mahomes took home the game's MVP, and Jackson Mahomes later took home a couple of sexual assault charges, and the Eagles took home a bitter, bitter loss. The 2022 season was a winding road that hit a snag just before the finish line, but other than that, not too shabby. Now you're ready for the 2023 NFL season. If you like this video, check out more of my season-long recaps. I don't know, 2015, 07, 08, I don't even remember what we did, but check them and subscribe.